Well, hi, everybody. It's another Conversations With, and I am delighted my pal is here, Bonnie Wallace. And Bonnie, you got to tell us what you've been up to. You've been doing all kinds of things. So let's go.
Well,
You got a new studio. Let's start with that.
So Joy Asana, which is a yoga studio that I opened in Connecticut, which just moved to Thompson. So it's just over the border. It's only about 20 minutes from Charlton. It's
Great.
a quick drive. And we moved into a historic mill building, which has been really interesting. Because when you renovate an old mill building that was built in like the 1800s,
Yep.
you really open up a gigantic can of worms.
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about because for a long time in my life, 30 years to be exact, I was in Ware, Massachusetts, and we have all those mill complexes. We even had one mill that used to drive off the Ware River, had a paddle wheel that made electricity to the building at one time. So it was great. But boy, trying to fix them up, floors were angled, and then they used to oil the floors at one time in some of those buildings, and the floors were really, slick. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I know. So you've had some fun.
Yes. So moving into that space, we did a lot of renovating, and we had to have a whole new plumbing system put in, and so it's been a big renovation. But the nice thing is now the space is beautiful. We have a big studio.
Good.
Starting, up a fall schedule in a couple of days. So by September 10th, we'll have the new fall lineup of classes and workshops. We're having a well-known medium. His name is Roland Comtois, and he does these things called purple papers. And he, ahead of time, he writes these messages from people who passed over on these purple papers, and then people come, and he, I don't know how he knows the names of people ahead of time, and he reads these purple papers, and people get messages from their loved ones. Anyways.
I have to tell you, I have a great friend who's in Auburn, as a matter of fact, and she's done 2 or 3 shows with us, and she is unbelievable. In fact, Jen went to her, and as part of that, in the middle of the conversation, she says, "I've got this woman who keeps butting in," and it happened to be my mother. So anyway, but she also said something about one of my nieces was not feeling well or was sick, and the next day my sister Mary sends me an email and tells me that her daughter Katie was almost had to go to the hospital, and I said, because I thought it was all, ooh.
Yeah, exactly.
Ooh, but it's amazing what they can do. It really is.
Yes, he's really well known.
Yeah.
He goes all over New England, so he's coming to the studio in October.
Great.
It's a Friday night in October. It's called Validating the Afterlife is his program with the purple papers. Yeah. So we have a lot of workshops coming up. And I know I had mentioned this before on the show, but I want to mention it again. We have some special classes that are not offered anywhere else. And one of them is developed by the previous owner of the studio, John. It's called Tai Yoga Chi, and it's a combination of Tai Chi, yoga, and Qigong. And it's a gentle practice. People at any level of fitness can do it. Any age can do it, and people love it. People love his class.
You talk about that. The interesting thing, there's been a bunch of articles I've noticed that they're talking about it in yoga in relationship to medicine, that it really helps people, that it can really, if they get into it, that it can really help them with their own medical issues.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it, too, is in yoga or Tai Chi even, these practices are so connected to the breath work. And I was just reading an interesting article about this. Most of us are never, fully breathing. We're always taking short, abbreviated breaths.
Most people don't know how to breathe.
Right.
I mean, when I was a very young guy and I got my first job in radio, I was going to Boston University School of Communications, but it was full-time days, and I was working at the radio station. And the program director who hired me, Dave Maynard, suggested I go to nights at Emerson. And I had a great teacher her name was Fran Crowley. And before we even talked about radio, she used to open the windows, the old classrooms, and we, in the middle of December in Boston, we used to stand in front of the window, and she taught us how to breathe from our stomachs, not from our lungs. And I sit back, and I can read a whole newscast and never, but you watch even some of these TV people on the street, and they're gasping for breath, you know, because they're breathing from here. And you really breathe. She taught us how to breathe from our stomach. And it was, you know, I could go on and do a whole football game and never get tired, never get winded, because I didn't overuse my lungs, which can tire you out. Mm-hmm.
Or just breathing up into the top part of the lungs and just use that shallow breathing and not really allowing the lungs to expand fully. Like when you talk about belly breathing, what that means is the diaphragm releases downward.
Yeah.
And when the diaphragm releases downward, the belly comes up. And when the belly comes up and the diaphragm releases downward, then the lungs can come all the way down. So they're not just, when you're breathing, just filling up the top half of your lungs, but you're filling all the way down into the low and into the sides of the lungs. People forget to fill the back of their lungs. I studied voice, you know, so I spent many lessons having, you know, voice teachers hold my back. Make my hands go up.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. So you know what I'm talking about. And it was always interesting to me. And I watched television, and Jen says, "You're very critical." I says, it's not that I'm critical. These kids that are doing news don't know how to breathe, and they're out of breath, and they're gasping, and you can hear them on the microphones when they pull air in. You know, and I say, what are they doing? You know.
Yeah, and so I think that's just common for most people, because most people haven't had lessons in breathing. Like they go to school.
So you have some great classes.
Right, and so I think whatever class you're taking, whether it's yoga or Tai Chi or something like this, it's helping you relearn how to breathe in order to fill the lungs completely. When the lungs fill completely, it oxygenates all of our cells. Our cells need oxygen to be healthy. So
it's called stay alive.
Exactly. And so when you say it's linked to medicine, it's like, well, obviously, because then we're oxygenating our cells. But it's more than just that, because then you have all of the fascia, the soft tissue that's, you know, wrapped around our bones and, you know, connecting the muscles to the bones. And the soft tissue, when we are not using it, when we're not working it, it becomes hard and it becomes thick, and it decreases our mobility. And when we're less mobile, again, it decreases our health. So when we do yoga and we are able to work the fascia, the soft tissue in between the joints, and break it up, smooth it out. It's supposed to be smooth connective tissue. Smooth it out. Then again, it increases our mobility, not just on the mat, but in everything we do. Which again brings us greater health and vibrancy.
So now does John teach that program?
John teaches the Thai Yoga Chi, yes. And he also teaches a class called Nia, which is something that I'm also certified in. And I use in my Joyasana classes. So when I teach Joyasana, it's a lot of it comes from Nia. And Nia's more dancey. It's, you know, dancing and lifting the heart rate up, getting the heart rate up, and moving.
So now let's talk. How's it doing? You getting people in there?
Yeah, and what's great is I really haven't done much advertising other than
you don't have to. Yeah,
I really have just been going by, you know, posting things in the Facebook group and That's really it.
Well, the thing you have to
Word of
understand
mouth.
is too, that's the best.
Emails.
Look, as an old marketing guy, I spent years doing it, and I've written more ads and done more ads than any 6 people you know. The best form of advertising is word of mouth. Someone says, "Hey, I go to a class. You should come," and that beats. There's nothing you can do that beats it. you know?
Exactly.
And I used to tell people all the time, even when I sold advertising, I used to say to them, the most important thing is you can do is be good to your customers. Because if you get a disgruntled customer, do anything you can to appease them without giving away the store, obviously. Because some people are unreasonable. I mean, I got it. and you have to know that. But the point I make is that one person who thinks you're great will tell, 30 other people. The person who's mad at you will tell 300 other people, and it's tough to offset it. It really is. But that's great that you got people out there that are excited and they come and they have a good time.
Yes.
And they're enjoying it and they're going to tell people.
Yes, and that takes time too. I mean, I've been teaching since 2006.
Well, the other thing too, but it takes time to build it up.
Yes.
'Cause any business, it takes time. And the worst thing that can happen to you, and I've watched it happen on occasion, somebody will open a new restaurant and they'll hype it and hype it and hype it, and opening night, they get buried. And you'd be surprised how many people never come back because they didn't have enough help. The kitchen couldn't handle it. Food was coming out late. And I used to tell them, open quietly, just open up, don't say a word. And you can have a grand opening on Thursday, but open Monday so that the help and everybody can now get an opportunity. And then the other thing I used to recommend to them is you should take one night about a week before you open and have all the help bring their families. And I said, it's going to cost you some money, but that way you got your best friends, you get your help, and their parents come in and their families, and they now work it, because the worst thing that can happen to a new business is get more than you can handle, and then you got a problem.
Right.
But as you grow, you slowly build up, and you add more programs, you add more teachers, and you add and you don't overburden what you have.
Yes.
And you can do that very easily.
Yeah, we were even slower than that because we opened August 10th and our ribbon cutting ceremony with the Chamber of Commerce isn't until September 26th.
Well, that's good.
We had like a solid month and a half.
Well, no, but Bonnie,
settle.
but don't laugh about it. That's fine, but don't worry about it because that's good, because that way you've got a month under your belt, and you'll grow it and you'll take your time, and it will grow, as you want it to grow.
Yes, and I have had disgruntled people from the other,
Yeah.
where we were located that were mad that I moved, and they were upset that, I had to raise the prices. He was charging very low prices that I couldn't stay open with. I had, and what I'm charging is not unreasonable, but people were used to it a certain way.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know, part of me thinks sometimes, and I don't know, I could be wrong about this, but I think sometimes people associate business ownership with something that a man does. And I think, where John owned it for so long, and I think having a woman come in and own a business when I have kids, I think some people have some ingrained, deep down opinions about that might not speak out loud, but I don't know. I could be wrong.
Well, no, you're not wrong. And I'm going to tell you why. If you've watched the primary, the number of women that have run for office, because to be real candid, we've had the men running this country and the Commonwealth and the communities for many, many years, and they haven't done a very good job. Okay, so it's time for women, and you see it, and I'm working with one right now who's a candidate for office locally, and it's refreshing because they bring a whole different perspective to management. And I've told the story 100 times. I did a great study with one of my dear friends when I studied psychiatry with Dr. Borenstein, and Dr. Borenstein has long since died, but was he did it when they had a little room down a side street and they actually had a couch, you know, way back. But he was a medical doctor also, so he could prescribe medication and so forth. But Morris and I did a study, and I learned from him that women outperform men. And the reason is, it goes back to when you're born. From the time, do you have a brother?
No.
No. Okay, well, if you had a brother.
I have 4 boys, though, so I've
Well, so
seen
you
them
know.
grow.
Okay. So now we're on track. When a little boy is born, from the time his little head pops out of his mummy until he's 5 years old, he's 80% of what he's going to be in life. From the time he goes to school at 6 until either high school or college when he graduates, so for the next 17 or 16 years, he learns 20% of what he's going to be. Okay? But 80% was developed between born and 5. Now, when a little boy is born, by the time his mother gets to see him for the first time, Dad has already got a football, a baseball glove, a Tonka truck, and a Lionel train set. And between the ages of born and 5, little boys, and my hand is up, are taught to play. We're taught to play. Oh, when little Lulu is born, from the time her little head pops out until she's 5, Mummy has taught her all the skills that it takes to run something. The organizational skills, how to change Bobby, how to put her to bed, how to help Mom do the dishes, help Mom set the table, help Mom make the bed. So in those formative years, women learn the skills. That's why 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, all the executive secretaries to the powerful presidents were women, and they basically ran the office. Okay? All the nurses in the hospitals were women. If people knew how many nurses delivered a baby because the doctor was playing golf and didn't get back in time, they'd fall over. The doctors couldn't even fill out a sheet. The nurses had to do all that. And so I could go on for another hour, but the fact is that for years and years, women were much, much better at running businesses than men. And they basically ran them.
Right. And it would just, what I would hope is that we can eventually shift that women who are actually running the business get credit for it and get the financial compensation that a man does. Because I think the reality of what we're living in now is that women still don't have equal compensation. And it's very unpopular to point that out, but it's true.
It's true.
And
well, it's not unpopular. One of the things that's going on is that as more and more women get involved in our governments, you're going to see these changes take place. I mean, it's just, I hate to use the term, but it's probably accurate. It's just a matter of time. And we see more and more and more women running businesses. We see more and more successful women. We see more and more women in the Senate and the Congress of the United States. And as that, and that's an involve, that's going to involve, it's going to roll over. One of the great discussions, even in churches, is while it may be a man in the pulpit, you know who's running the church? Who's all the volunteers? Who's running all the ministries? Who's doing all the legwork? Is the women, you know, and so the problem is they did it for years but never got the credit for it.
right.
Now they're starting to get the credit for it. And plus the fact, I've told the story for years. Back in the 70s, I hired a woman to do a talk show, and they called me crazy. They said, it's not, Vaughn, you're nuts, you're gonna ruin the radio station. It was one of the best things we ever did. That program went through the roof with her. Then I went out and I hired a girl to do the morning show. And they said, now you're really nuts. And her name was Samantha in the Morning. She was awesome. Okay? And then I went out, I got 3 beautiful young ladies who had just graduated from college, and I taught them a little sales tricks. And they used to call them Dickie's Angels. And I had 3 beautiful women, and this was back in the 70s when they weren't in vogue. And they went out and they were vicious. Because you know why? You know how hard it is for a person in authority, a man, for instance, to look a delightful, beautiful young lady and say no. They couldn't do it. So they said yes, and the kids were selling advertising, you know. And I proved the point that women could be very, very successful. Had the station in Killington. The kid walked into 22 years old, just graduated from St. Michael's, demanding to see me. My secretary came in and she says, there's a young, brassy little kid in the lobby, you know, and she's demanding to see you, and she wants a job. And I said, really? I got to see this. So I walked out. Her name was Sherry Burkheimer. She just sent me a note the other day. She's still up in Vermont. And she walked in and said, sat down. And I said, what do you know about radio? She says, nothing, but you're going to teach me. And she was great. And I hired her. She did promotions. Then I moved her up to sales. Then she became sales manager. And she was my right hand. Whenever and of course, then you get the stuff, oh, well, that's his honey, that's his little favorite. She wasn't my favorite. When I needed something done, she got it done. And so what do? You go to the one who delivers for you. Mm-hmm. And she delivered. You know, whenever we needed it, and it got to the point where whenever anybody needed anything, they ran to Sherry. And, but believe me, over the years, I would have always had more women on my radio staffs than I had men.
Those people become invaluable, I've learned as a business owner. The people who work for you that will always show up, will
Yep.
always go the extra mile,
Yep.
will always, you know, just go above and beyond,
Yep.
and you know that they're fully invested in your mission. They want to support everything you're doing. It's amazing to have those people and know that they're on your team. And you're right.
And when you need something, you know right where to go.
You do.
To get it done.
Yeah.
And you know without even a doubt that it'll get done. Remember a great story.
And they'll be happy to do it.
We had, our station had blown everybody away in the ratings up there. And when I took them, there was 4 stations in town, and I had an AM and an FM, and they were number 3 and 4. A year after I got there, they were number 1 and 2. And we blown everybody away in the ratings. And I said to Sherry, I want to have a nice party for the staff. Call Teddy up at the Cortina Inn and set it up for me. And I want it done right. So we have the big party, and I get there, and I'm talking to Sherry. And she says, I had my hands full, but I got it done. She says, I finally said to them here in the inn, look, my boss is Dick Vaughn, and he's the most demanding person I've ever met in my life. Now, he demands more of himself than he does anybody else. But I want this, when he walks in here, this thing is going to be perfect. Got it? and they just looked at her. But it was, because this was a treat for the staff, and I wanted it done right. But she delivered. And she knew what to do, you know, and so if you can surround yourself with quality, top-notch people like that, who support you, care about you, and understand the goals, can't beat them. And I think it's only a matter of time, honestly. I mean, I did it 35 or 40 years ago, and that was my great success. Everybody says, how does he do it? I mean, I had people say, you're a genius. No, I'm not. I wasn't a genius. I learned from a guy named John Kennedy. I interviewed in front of the town hall steps in Ware when he was a senator. 2 years later, he was the president of the United States. I was invited to his inauguration. And after the interview, he and I were chatting. And he told me an interesting story. He said, my father taught me, and his father was very successful, when you get involved, surround yourself with the brightest people you can find, and they're going to make you look like a genius. And when you saw what he did, when he became president, he surrounded himself with the brightest and the best he could find. Bulk of them came from Harvard, where he went to school. But they made him look great because they were great. And I was never afraid of losing my job because I was one of the owners. So I didn't have to worry. So I would surround myself with the best people I could find. And if you got to pay them a little more, pay them a little more. Because in the end, the benefits far outweigh any problem. And so, but women in business today it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And more businesses will be run by women.
Yeah, I still think we still have some, I think.
It's
I
called
think we have
resentment.
I think it is.
It's
And I
called
think-
resentment.
I think we have to be patient with helping people to see that they have these underlying beliefs that might be, a little bit
Yeah.
dated, I guess might be the best word for it, or, somewhat limiting beliefs of what women and men are supposed to do.
Yeah.
Because I think, to speak to the men too, I think as we raise families, there's these expected roles that women are expected
Yeah.
to do one thing and men are expected to do another thing. But in today's society, I think that we're creating a more balanced family where women and men are both participating in traditional roles.
Sharing the responsibilities.
Right. And I
mean-
think even some women who are the primary breadwinners in the family, then the men are staying home.
Yeah.
And I think for them, that's a hard role to be in too, because then they're, men in
Yeah.
the traditional woman's role,
Yeah.
So I think there's some long-standing beliefs that we have about what a woman's supposed to do, what a man's supposed to
Yeah.
do, that are sort of ingrained in our consciousness
Yeah.
collectively, that I think we all can look at a little better to kind of go, hey,
Yeah.
does it have to be
Yeah.
this way? Can we
Right.
allow men to stay home, men to do more caretaking
Yeah.
roles in
Oh,
the
no.
family? And can we allow women to be breadwinners and to, allow women to make the same amount of money that a man
Oh,
does, and not, like you
I-
said, be resentful towards
No,
them for it?
That's right. Well, it's people like you that are going to form that and are going to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. But getting back to taking over a business and making it a profitable business, because you have to pay the bills and you have to have the money to do it. And if someone along the way is a little unhappy or a little disgruntled, they'll get over it. And if not, you know what I learned a long time ago, and it goes back to everything you do in life. You get exactly what you pay for. If in the old days, if you wanted to go out and pay somebody $5 an hour to do a job, and you thought, oh boy, I can save money, the job you got back was you got $5 worth. But if you paid somebody $10, you could expect more from that individual. And so it goes back to that. And I think, if you lose somebody, that's okay. Because for every one you lose, as you move forward, you'll gain two. And there'll be those people. Because the bottom line is you still get exactly what I remember the old days when Ames discount department stores came in, and you could go in there and get clothes for $1. And you'd wash them once and they'd fall apart. And people couldn't understand why. What did you expect? You paid $1 for the thing when the average comparable one was selling for $5. Well, you got a bargain. Really? No, you didn't. I'm just, believe me, when I buy things, I buy the best I can buy, because I know that, number one, it's going to last. Number two, I'm going to look better in it. Number three, it's good quality, and I'm not going to have a problem with it. So you get what you pay for. So you'll be fine. Don't worry about it.
I have a gut feeling that that's the truth, that that's the case.
It is.
I feel good that I've,
Well,
sort of
nobody likes to.
done the best I can.
But nobody likes. If you were paying $3 for something, and suddenly it's $4, nobody likes that.
No.
Okay? Nobody does. But you know what I learned about business? You can never stay the same. Okay? From year to year, I used to increase the budget because I had to do more business because people wanted raises, the taxes were going up. It was going to cost me more money to operate next year than it did this year. And because you can't stay the same. You either get big or you get small. Because if you try to stay the same, you're going to get small.
Right.
Because that means you're not growing. And you can never stay the same. You get smaller.
Exactly.
So you've got to constantly, next year you need more people than you had this year. Next year you're going to add 3 courses. Next year you're going to maybe need more room. You know,
Exactly.
so that's part of growing a business, and that's part of having great, satisfied customers.
Yeah.
That simple. I love you. You're a terrific person. You really are, and I'm glad everything's working out.
I love you too.
And we're going to
I
start doing shows
appreciate-
down there.
Yes, I can't wait.
Yes,
so
we're gonna do
We're
that.
going to do some live yoga, and what we'll do for TV Charlton is we'll have some segments that are geared towards specific needs
Good.
that people at home watching
Good.
might have. So, for instance, somebody that has neck pain.
We'll fix 'em.
We'll do a 30-minute show
Terrific.
with yoga for neck
Good.
pain.
We're out of time.
Yeah.
But thank you very much, and we'll be looking for these programs, and that's another Conversations With.